G'day. So we're doing for Scam of the Week, multinational tax dodgers, because the ATO data, the transparency data, has just landed. So we have all our favourites there on the list. The reason we're doing this for Scam of the Week is because multinational tax dodging is the biggest scam in the world, facilitated by tax lawyers and the big four, PwC, EY, KPMG, and Deloitte. And billions flow out to tax havens and flow out to foreign head offices and to foreign shareholders as a result of close to the line tax practices. So let's kick off with one of our favorites. And here it is, AGL. You're either a customer of AGL Origin or maybe one or two others. It's one of the biggies. $13 billion AGL Energy brought in the door. $13 billion last year. The data is slightly lagging. This is 22-23. And they paid zero tax on that $13 billion. They did pay a bit at the energy generation level, which is coal and gas and stuff like that, digging it out of the ground, drilling it. They made almost $3 billion there in revenue and paid $38 billion. So pocket fluff from AGL overall. ANZ Hospital's Topco. If you get into the ASIC database and you do a lot of searches, you'll find who owns all Australia's private hospitals. It's owned by a mob in the Cayman Islands. Used to be called Healthscope. And the Northern Beaches Hospital, which we've done some investigation on. Bit of a rort going on there. This is the thing that owns that. ANZ, it's called ANZ Hospitals Topco Proprietary Limited. There's a mid-co and a bottom-co and all sorts of co's in there. Heaven knows what for tax structuring probably. In any case, they brought in $2.8 billion and paid not one red cent in tax. There you go. That's the Brookfield guys that control that, the financiers from North America. Now, in the electricity grid, the people playing in the electricity grid didn't pay much again this year, despite the high electricity price. We got Ausgrid Finance, zero. Ausgrid Management, zero. Australian Gas Networks, we got them paying pocket fluff on $673 million. They paid 1.9 or 2, for all intents and purposes, $2 million on $673 million. Nice work if you can get it. Wish we were paying tax at Michael West Media at that kind of rate. Mind you, taxes aren't levied on total income. It's on taxable income. But what they do is, of course, the whole game is not to make a profit in Australia if you are controlled overseas. You siphon it all out because if you make a profit, you have to pay tax. Okay, so moving right along now, and this is a little one which we've noticed over the years. It's very annoying because Babcock and Brown went belly up. Remember the financial engineers, the mini Macquarie with Orco? Remember when they went belly? Well, this is the long life of these things. There are two Babcock entities still going, even though they went belly up more than 10 years ago. And Babcock and Brown International made $623 million, $624 million, and Babcock Australia Holdings made $486 million. So there you go, over $1 billion. Who is getting this money? Where is it going? Is it all going to wages or salaries or something? There's probably some debt in there, no doubt, but the fact is they made no taxable income, paid no tax profit, even being dead for 14 years. Generally, if you look at this data, the same patterns prevail of the big four banks and Suncorp paying a lot of tax, billions, more than 10 billion between them, billion that is, and BHP and Rio. This year, Rio paid, in this set of data, they paid more than BHP. In fact, BHP is generally the top taxpayer. They paid $5 billion in tax, and Rio paid BHP $5.4 billion, Rio $5.8 billion. Well done, Rio. Generally, under other trends that prevail in this data, we've got pharma, which all pay a bit of tax, Glaxo and Eli Lilly and all these guys. They always pay a bit, but they're massive transfer prices. It's basically a rep office here where they sell us overpriced capsules that they made in China. But they pay a little bit of tax, just so not to look sus. The grog companies paid a lot of tax. The cigarette companies always pay a lot of tax, and they've got the other levies on top of that to the state government, federal government for the smokers, from the smokers. Defence did pay a bit. We've nailed them in the past a bit, but the weapons manufacturers. But it is our money after all, and there is a boom in war. There's wars going on all over the place, and these guys are well set to benefit from that. No wonder they're pushing us into a war with China. Consumer goods, Nestle and Kellogg's and these guys paid quite a bit of tax. Now, they didn't used to, Unilever and these sort of ones as well, but they did because during COVID they lifted the margins on us, and that meant groceries at the supermarket were more expensive, and they haven't brought back those margins, as you wouldn't if you can afford not to. And so they paid a little bit of tax in this set of data. But that's interesting that's part of the reason for the high grocery prices in Australia. It's all the foreign stuff that we import from these big consumer goods manufacturers. And, of course, they haven't given that margin back. So that's one of the reasons we're getting shafted when we go shopping. BPAH, famous tax dodgers. Brookfield, they call it BPAH because they don't want anybody to notice what the name of the company is. In fact, while we've got you, we did notice in this data this year, this is quite funny, there's a bunch of companies in there that have just put themselves in as numbers. ACN this, ACN, 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 ACN. There's one mob, ACN 166 119 133 Proprietary Limited, that made $3 billion but managed not to make any taxable income or any tax payable. ACN, whatever your number is, we'll be checking you out on ASIC, don't you worry. We're coming to get you. Find out who the directors and the shareholders of ACN 166 119 133 Proprietary Limited, because why wouldn't you call yourself a name? You wouldn't call yourself a name because you don't want anybody to know who you are, and you don't pay any tax. There you go. We're watching you, ACN 166. BPAH done that. Now, we've got a remarkable feat here from Chevron, the big US oil company. Chevron Australia Downstream Holdings Proprietary Limited, they made $9.5 billion at the total income line, but managed to expunge all taxable income and paid zero tax. However, credit where credit's due. Chevron Australia Holdings, $24 billion, $14 billion in taxable income, and $4.2 billion payable in tax, $4.2 billion. So Chevron, which was one of our biggest tax dodgers for the many years, we've done the top 40 tax dodgers chart. I'll get that going again this year. These figures from the ATO have lobbed very early for some reason. They usually come in December, but we've got them now. So there you go. But Chevron, congratulations. And that's probably testament to the fact that the ATO pulled off its gloves and came after you and smacked you in that historic court case. There's nothing like that. Australia's regulators should take more enforcement action and stop dilly-dallying and go after these corporate crooks. But Chevron is now paying some tax, finally, after a decade. Well done, Chevron. CITIC Resources, coal mob, zero, $800 million revenue. McKinsey Pacific Rim Incorporated, $400 million in telling people what to do, providing, paper shuffling, giving advice to governments and that kind of thing. Not 1 cent in tax from McKinsey, the consultancy firm. ConocoPhillips, the gas mob, American gas mob, $5.7 billion in total income, zero tax paid, zero. Energy Australia, one of our favourites, used to be number 2 after Glencore, the coal mob, Swiss coal mob. Energy Australia Holdings Limited. Used to be owned by Energy Australia in the British Virgin Islands, literally called Energy Australia in the British Virgin Islands. Now, it's still controlled out of Hong Kong, and I think controlled ultimately by a billionaire, Michael Kadoorie, living in Mayfair or somewhere in London. So if you're with Energy Australia, don't you worry, they're not paying any tax, but you're still paying. You're still getting absolutely clobbered on your energy bills, clobbered. Record high prices that are coming down a bit now at the wholesale level, but there you go. Energy Australia, which is really Hong Kong owned, controlled rather, paying no tax yet again, Energy Australia. And they do coal mines, gas, renewable energy. They're the old, that was privatised. This is a bunch of privatised assets that the state governments sold off for a one-off sugar hit, and they've been one of Australia's biggest tax dodgers. CSL Limited, funnily enough, which makes gigantic margins, you would have thought, enough to pay tax, but no, they made $4.5 billion at the revenue line and managed to eke out $109 million in taxable income and paid zero tax. The blood group, CSL, there you go. Despite making sure they get all those Mexicans coming over the border, all those Central Americans flooding into America that Trump's rallying his nation against and giving them a few bucks to take their blood. So not enough money in that, obviously, to pay any tax. Endeavour Energy Network Management, $310 million, nothing, no tax, another electricity grid scammer. Expedia Australia and Booking.com, these guys make a lot of money out of the short stay accommodation market in Australia, but they are tax dodgers. Booking.com, Netherlands, and Expedia, I think, is maybe American, but in any case, $163 million they made, $1.1 million in tax. Nice work if you can get it. ExxonMobil Australia, the reigning champion, the Campion del Mundo in the top 40 tax dodgers, ExxonMobil Australia, that recently just said that, well, we might not want to clean up our, we've been making billions of dollars out of the Bass Strait by drilling your oil, but we might just leave the stuff in the water and let you guys fix it up, once it's all gone, those Bass Strait reserves. It's a bit of a kerfuffle about that now, as you can imagine, because they are mighty tax dodgers, mighty. They came number one for 2 or 3 years on the top 40 tax dodging stakes. Now, they actually don't faint. They have paid some tax. And here it is. ExxonMobil Australia, $25 billion they pulled in the door. When we first started following, they're making about 10. Now it's $26 billion. They managed to rake most of that offshore in interest on their loans and so on. But $3.4 billion inescapable taxable income or taxable profit. And they paid $844 million in tax. And it sounds like a lot, but when you got a track record like these grifters, it's not much money at all, but it is good. Congratulations, you grifters from Exxon, finally paying some tax in Australia after operating for all these years, shafting us. Now, anyway, hooray for them. Facebook Australia in a stoush with the government, Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation at the moment, over not wanting to pay Rupert protection money to operate because they steal his content. Facebook actually paid some tax. Good on you, Facebook. $25 million. Sorry, that's Exxon. Facebook, $1.3 billion. Not much really, is it? But they wouldn't probably, like Google, declare all their revenue here that they make from Australian customers. But in any case, $1.3 billion they made. They got a profit from that of $126 million, and 30 they actually paid some tax. Facebook, one of the new economy stocks. Congratulations, Facebook. $38 million in tax they paid. That's the price of our privacy, apparently. Fletcher Building, New Zealand's biggest, huge building company, and New Zealand, a perennial tax dodger. Fletcher Building, again, $2.7 billion in revenue, paid zero tax. Well done, Fletcher Building. Fuchs Lubricants. Yes, Fuchs Lubricants, that's F-U-C-H. Lubricants Australasia Proprietary Limited. Fuchs paid $5 million in tax from $364 million total income. They should probably change their name to ACN something or other. Glencore Investment, our first champion. in the top 40 tax dodgers. Those boys from the Swiss headquarters, they run those embargo breakers, they run a tight regime, big in commodities in Australia. Glencore Investment, this is how big they are. I mean, this is just a monster. $42 billion in revenue, $17 billion in taxable income, and $4.7 billion. Now, they were paying zilch. They were paying zilch for years. They were the biggest tax dodger. They were our first champion, of the top 40 tax dodging league, and of the tax dodging chart rather. And but now they are paying tax, and we like to think we've had a bit of a hand in that because we did embarrass them a lot, and then they tweaked the way that they reported to come within our model so they wouldn't be number one tax dodger again. A few years ago, they actually changed their methodology because we'd kept on hanging them out to dry. But those good old boys, they're paying some tax now here, and so they should. Goldman Sachs Australia, ANZ proprietary, Goldman Sachs Holdings, that what do they call it? The giant vampire squid, the Wall Street Investment Bank. Very dodgy accounting. It didn't pay tax for years. But Josh Frydenberg, congratulations, Joshy. Congratulations. You finally paid some tax. 41 million, 42 million in total revenue. Sorry, 2.8 billion in total revenue, 143 million profit, and 43 million in tax. So that's something. Come on down, Goldmans. You finally started to pay a little bit of your fair share. You cuff-linked buccaneers, you. Google Australia, one of our perennial favourites. The old Google Australia, eh? Now, Google Australia don't even bother, and we've done the work on this if you want to check on the search bar on the website. Google Australia, what they do is don't report all their revenue. They make 5, 6, 7 billion or something like that from Australian customers selling services in Australia, but they don't report all that as revenue because they've decided to have a different revenue number. They've just decided to call what they think is revenue, and so they've reported $2 billion in revenue. It's at least twice that. Google Australia, and 449 million in taxable income for 124 million in tax. Now, that would be higher were it not for the government's ridiculous, ludicrous digital media bargaining code where they have to pay money to Nine Entertainment and Rupert and Kerry Stokes and all these guys because they whinge about having their content stolen. It's called the Digital Media Bargaining Code. And so they claim that probably. We've asked them, but they haven't responded with any detail. But clearly it's a tax deduction. So the payments going from Google to Rupert and so on would be tax deductible. So the Digital Media Bargaining Code is helping Google pay less tax in this country while they're giving money to Rupert to keep Rupert alive, whose accounts came out. We're going to write a story and have a separate look at his accounts here. Suffice to say, they are in trouble. They've been sacking people. Their media business is not going well. It's getting slaughtered by the internet, and that's why they've got their hand up for money from the government. So we can't expect much tax from them. Halliburton grifters, zero tax. Hancock Prospecting, Gina's big company. Gina, again, a big taxpayer. Give Gina her credit. She looks a bit grumpy about having to pay people more than $2 an hour, but she does pay a lot of tax in Australia. Her companies do at least. $6.6 billion Hancock Prospecting brought in the door from flogging iron ore to China and so forth. And they paid $931 million in tax, almost $1 billion there. Fortescue, Twiggy Forests operation. Good old Twiggy. $3.5 billion Twiggy paid. Well, Twiggy's company, Fortescue, paid, and he owns about 40% of it. So Twiggy is funding the ABC single-handedly. $24 billion Twiggy made, a lot more than Hancock. $24 billion flogging iron ore. I mean, incredible. Startup from Twiggy 25 years ago. $12 billion in taxable income, $3.5 billion in tax. Fortescue. IBM, $1 million on their $2 billion in revenue. IKEA, whoa, try not to fall off my seat here. IKEA, the great tax dodgers from Europe, they managed to pay $29 million in tax on their $1.7 billion in total income. Incitec Pivot, this is a classic case of people being roisted by the gas cartel. Incitec Pivot, which makes fertilizers, is a huge gas user. They made $3.8 billion at the revenue line, total income, zero profit, zero tax. We can't blame them for being tax dodgers because they're getting screwed by the foreign-dominated gas cartel. Ingenia. Now, we need to have a look at these guys, these caravan park communities, which are increasingly swanky, and they look like they make a lot of money, particularly given the housing crisis. And there's a few tax scams in there which we're going to have a look at eventually when we get around to it, but they're not paying any tax, about $500 million in revenue there, the Ingenia Communities mob. Impex Australia, that Japanese multinational, which whines and moans about having to pay all this and having to pay tax on its earnings from exploiting Australia's gas and bullying the government into its policy settings. Impex paid zero. Impex Holdings Australia on $8 billion in revenue. And another mob called Impex Australia Proprietary Limited did pay $5 million, but on almost $500 million in revenue. So Impex, well done. Thank you for contributing to this nation and helping to finance the schools and the hospitals and the roads, which your children, the executives, which they use. Well done on that. InvoCare, there's money in death. InvoCare made $500 million, paid $13 million in tax, which isn't much. But the fact is there won't be anything soon because they're under offer from some mob of privateers, private equity people out of the US. James Hardie Research, Le Plus ça change, c'est la même chose. $634 million in revenue, zero tax. JB Hi-Fi, by the way, thumbs up, big taxpayer. $9 billion JB Hi-Fi made in Australia. And on their 764 of taxable income declared, they paid $229 million. So big effort from that retailer. Huge success story in Australia. Good old KPMG. Now, most of it with the big four, they're all partnerships. They're opaque structures, so we don't know if they pay any tax at all at the partnership level, or whether the partners pay any. They probably pay a bit, but there are a couple of listed entities that they and PwC have, and KPMG Holdings Australia Proprietary Limited made $194 million and paid $3 million in tax, and KPMG Investments Holdings Proprietary Limited $181 million and paid $186,000 in tax. Not much. That's pocket fluff. Belly button lint. Lendlease Corporation, blow me over with a feather. Lendlease, thanks to partially to its trust structure, but also due to other shenanigans, pays more tax in other countries than it pays in Australia. But they've actually, don't faint, they've actually paid some tax, $18 million on their $6 billion in total income. Clive Palmer's Mineralogy International paid $67 million, so Clive paying a bit there on his $469 million in revenue. Good old MBN still struggling to make a profit, $6 billion in revenue, zero profit, zero tax. Netflix Australia, these scam merchants using their Hollywood accounting have managed to sting Australians for $1.1 billion in revenue and only made, even though we're just talking about a bloke with a computer, even though they only eked out $2.4 million in taxable income, they paid zero tax. Frankly, they're a disgrace. And now the latest thing they've done, so let's get rid of our Netflix subscriptions I have. They've axed all their Palestinian content to erase the memory of Palestine, no doubt under pressure to do that. So that was disappointing. Didn't play big in the news over here, but that's what's happened. Origin Energy. Origin, the old tax cheats, we busted them in the past, the gas mob. $19 billion, not a small company. and they paid $121 million in tax. So they're starting to pay a bit more. Sorry, they paid $568 million in tax. That was Paddy Power. So Origin, more than $500 million, starting to pay significant tax. About time, because the gas guys are making out like bandits. The betting guys, huge growth area, this thing. Paddy Power, which owns Sportsbet, it's an Irish mob. They actually paid some tax, $121 million on their $2.2 billion in income. The online gamers are notorious tax cheats, but they are starting to have to pay a bit because their profits are so huge. Again, not huge fixed costs, just a few blokes with computers doing odds and things, a bit of marketing, a lot of marketing spend. I bet they spend more than that on marketing with all the ads. And it's no wonder that they're paying a bit because they're in negotiation with the government still, which is dithering on whether to bring in advertising restrictions, which they should, and which the gambling lobby and the media lobby, which depends on these revenues, is lobbying against in Canberra right now. Good old Peabody, the US's biggest coal company, in the twilight of its existence, but it still made $4.7 billion in total income. Good old Peabody, which has structures. The Peabody Australia has structures in Gibraltar. Why would you be in Gibraltar? Well, might you ask? Zero tax from the coal giant. PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, ASEAN's Consulting Proprietary Limited made $1 billion, paid not 1 red cent in tax. Likewise, Pricewaterhouse Securities, $247 million, zero. So they're making a lot more than that in the partnership. But the companies like KPMG, and this is government money, most of it, they are tax dodgers. That is their business. They are the guys that advise all these other companies on how to cheat on tax. So you'd think they'd be good at it themselves, and they are. Zero income, zero tax from both. Just a lot of revenue, though. Puma Australia, these energy guys are making about $500 million, zero tax, gas, transport. Qantas Airways, good old Qantas, $19 billion in revenue. A huge company. Mind you, very difficult logistically to run, very difficult to make a profit out of aviation. So we do give them a bit of sympathy for that, even though they ripped us off with the 8,000 ghost flights and got pinged a tiny little bit for that. That would have been tax deductible. $400 million in profit, zero tax. QBE Insurance, the old insurance. Have you noticed how your insurance bills have been going up? Yeah, well, it's not coming out at the tax end, that's for sure. QBE, there it is, a monster. $8.5 billion in total income, $77 million in taxable income. But even though it made that $77 million, that pittance in taxable income, even though it managed to somehow get its tax down, mind you, you wouldn't know what's happening in reinsurance with all the global disasters, but zero tax. Good on you, QBE, well done. There's a mob in here we just noticed. A mob called Salads of Australia Proprietary Limited. We've never seen them before. We might have just missed them. Salads of Australia Proprietary Limited. We didn't realise there was so much money in Australia. $340 million they made in income, total income. No profit, no tax. Maybe they put a bit of that extra salad dressing on Salads of Australia's accounts. Salads of Australia. Santos Limited, good old Santos, which writes legislation in Australia for itself. Labor Party signs off on it, or the Libs, they all sign off on it. No tax again, $6.2 billion in revenue, $19 million in taxable income, but zero tax, even though they're meant to pay 30% on that, $20 million. Rio Tinto, as we said, that's $5.8 billion in tax. That's a lot. Roy Hill, another one of Gina's, $1.2 billion on $8.6 billion in total income. So Gina is a big taxpayer. Singapore Telecom, the mob that owns Optus, well, they've had a few travails this year, hacking things and stuff like that. $8 billion, not a cent paid in tax, no profit made at all. Vodafone. We forgot to check them, but Vodafone, they've never paid tax in Australia, so we'll put that in the story when we get around to writing it. Sony Australia in the music industry, we're all getting stung in the music industry, 1.5 billion, zero tax. Spark Topco, another foreign-controlled electricity mob, no tax. Swiss Re Australia, two reliably tax-effective insurance companies coming from, obviously, Switzerland. I don't think I've ever seen Swiss Re pay tax. Their two companies here have made more than $4 billion, well over $4 billion at the revenue line, and not paid a cent again for another year. I don't know how they do it. They never make a profit either. And usually if you look at a company not make a profit over years, you wonder, well, how can they exist? Well, they can do it with multinational tax avoidance. That's the point of it. It doesn't matter if they make money in Australia or if they record a profit or a loss in Australia. It's just a matter about getting the revenue out of the country. Sydney Airport, trust structure, all the trusts like Mirvac and those guys, they paid nothing. Sydney Airport, $146 million. It's a trust structure, so it's incumbent upon the members of the trust to pay the tax. And of course, they pay 15% or less, so it's half the corporate tax rate anyway. So that's a scam. They should never have allowed these structures in the first place. It's cost dozens of billions of dollars to the Treasury, dozens of billions of dollars over the year, all the property trusts and so on, and the airport trusts, the infrastructure trusts. Good old Kerry Stokes, Seven Group Holdings, he paid $119 million. He does pay a bit with Caterpillar and Seven Holdings Group, his mining interests, but of course Seven West Media in all sorts of disarray like the other TV stocks. Nine paid a bit of tax to give them their due, but Seven West Media, $1.6 billion in revenue, zero profit, zero tax. Don't know how long that will last. Tassal Group, the mob which is always in trouble over its fishing stuff with environmentalists, and rightly so. Tassal Group, $323 million in revenue, zero profit, zero tax yet again. Good old Boston Consulting Group, another one like McKinsey's, $3.9 million in tax. Don't faint. They paid tax. Unbelievable on their $352 million in revenue. Now, we can't find Oracle here, which does a lot of work for government as well. Maybe they just decided not to file because they break every other rule in the accounting book, as we have chronicled in the pages of Michael West Media. Oracle, the most non-compliant company in the country. Oracle, maybe they decided not to file, but we couldn't see them there. They might be there somewhere, I don't know, but couldn't see it. Snowy Hydro paid $75 million in tax, $4.2 billion in revenue, despite its travails. There you go. You wouldn't think it would you? You think it'd be like the old NBN, but no, it's paying a bit of tax. TikTok Australia, they made $174 million here. No doubt their revenues are going up. They're not very big because Facebook or Google, some of the others, but they paid $2.9 million in tax on that. Toga Group always flies deep beneath the radar. Property mob, Toga Proprietary Limited, never have had the pleasure of seeing the Toga Group ever pay tax, so we don't know much about them, but we'll mention them anyway because we've never seen evidence of them paying any tax. $161 million in revenue. Good old Transurban Holdings International, Queensland Finance, Transurban Queensland Holdings, four companies. Together, they've made well over $4 billion in revenue, and they paid $136,000 in tax. $136,787 in tax. Transurban. Now, it's a trust structure, a complicated trust structure, and verily so. They've done that in order to pay no tax, and they claim that one day they will be paying tax at the end of their toll road concessions. But that is a monopoly which is screwing motorists and screwing the Australian Taxation Office at the same time with every dollar that we pay every time we go through one of those tolls. What a scam. Uber. $14 million in tax, Uber. Incredible, unbelievable, Uber. You've actually paid some tax, you little scam artists. That was on $48 million in profit. And $2.9 billion now, Uber, Australia Holdings, $2.9 billion in total income. Ubers make a lot of money in Australia and paying very little tax because, you see, these things have not got high fixed costs. It's a computer and a few people operating computers in a head office. That's what Uber is. It's a cyber stock. Should be paying a lot more tax. Their margins must be massive. The money they're actually raking out of Australia must be huge, like Google. Vic Power Networks, they paid a bit. They were one of our top 40. They've suddenly, landed $36 million in tax. I mean, blow me over with a feather. That's incredible from Vic Power, who were up there in the top 40 at one stage. Virgin Australia Holdings. Virgin's never paid tax in Australia, of course. Airline, so it's partially an excuse. COVID, but, these guys are now owned by private equity people that are dying to float the thing and get off it, make their 3-banger or 5-banger or whatever they want to make by floating it on the ASX. So $5 billion in revenue there. They managed a profit of $522,000 only and paid no tax. Viva Energy Group, which is the old Shell. Congratulations to Viva Energy Group because they paid $261 million in tax. Mind you, they did make $27 billion in total income. And just a word of commendation for our old mate, Jeff Wilson. Good on you, Jeff. Well done, son. All Jeff's companies, WAM, that's Wilson Asset Management. WAM stands for Wilson Asset Management. It's a hard-hitting moniker. WAM Active, WAM Capital, WAM Global, WAM Leaders, WAM Microcap, WAM Research Limited. They all paid millions in tax. It looks like well over 100 million on less than $1 billion. Well, no, hang on. WAM Capital, $5 billion in profit, 63 in total income, $64 million in tax. So all Jeff's coming. Well done, Jeff. No wonder you've got a license, mate, to argue with everybody about why franking credits are so great, because WAM pays a lot of tax. And in fact, so does Platinum, so does Perpetual, so do all these finance companies, the superannuation guys, because they're not foreign and it's pretty hard to escape paying tax when you're making those sort of margins. WestConnex Finance, that's another Transurban thing probably, it's the road. They paid $37,000 in tax, probably what we paid personally, on their $252 million in income. Wilmar Australia, again, they're the biggest sugar mob in Australia, of course, never pay any tax. They're controlled out of, I think, Malaysia or Singapore. Wilson Parking, when you pay those massive, you get absolutely pillaged every time you go into one of those Wilson places. Well, we've done them in the past for tax dodging, and of course, they haven't let us down. Well, actually, they paid $2.8 million in tax, Wilson Parking. Incredible. On their almost $1 billion in revenue. So we don't know what's happening to that. Who would know? We'd have to go and have a look at their accounts, and even then you'd only get to 10% of the story. But Wilson Parking is an aggressive taxpayer. Woodside Energy, $2.7 billion in tax. So that's up there. That's done well, being a domestic mining or oil and gas multinational, Woodside. So they've got a bit of pull, obviously, in behind the scenes in politics when you pay that much tax. Yancoal Australia, they actually paid some tax. They're one of our previous top 40 shining lights, $1.6 billion in tax. So there you go. They can't avoid it anymore. There's so much money in coal these days. Zurich Financial Services, Zurich, another Swiss mob, paid $4.5 million in tax. But what do they make in revenue? $5 billion in revenue. These reinsurance companies are really clipping the ticket here in Australia. So there you go. On News Australia Holding, let's close with good old Rupert. We'll have a look at his accounts to find out what's going on. And as I said, he wouldn't be making a profit because that's why he's got his hand out for Google and Facebook money, because, his profits aren't what they used to be in Australia, but he has always been a notable tax dodger, Uncle Rupert. $1.9 billion in revenue, just under $2 billion in revenue, 190, just 200 million, call it 200 million flat in profit. And of course, even though profit should be taxed at 30%, somehow Rupert's got out of paying any tax, even though he's made that $200 million profit. So zero from Uncle Rupert. So there you have it. That is Australia's top 40 tax dodgers. Like, share, or comment. Keep a watch out for the story on the website. We'll shoot anything else through that we find, and we'll chase those mysterious ACN numbers, trying to hide behind their little numbers they are. That's what Glencore used to do. Just had some number. So that's why it was hard to find in the ASIC database, because you couldn't search Glencore because it was just a number. So tax scams, yeah, it's a big thing. It's the biggest racket in the whole world. There you have it. Scam of the week we're going to give to Energy Australia, who's back, possibly number one again. We don't know. We haven't done the model yet, but there you go. Despite the high electricity prices and the billions of dollars coming in the door in income, this Hong Kong-controlled Australian electricity company paid no tax yet again. Come on down, Energy Australia.